Hello, everybody. There is a very important and insightful article in the Substack by Phillips P. O'Brien, and I would like to share it with you. And it is about Trump changing sides and going with Putin. So let's read it. Okay, we are perilously close to the worst-case scenario on Trump and Ukraine. It seems that those who were saying for a long time that Trump was a brilliant negotiator, that he would get a good deal for Ukraine, and he would want to put Putin in his place, that he would get a good deal for Ukraine, all of it is being revealed as nonsense. Indeed, this was the week that Trump reached out to give Putin much of what the Russian dictator craved, asking nothing in return and before any formal negotiations started. The European reaction seems stunned, which is just as worrying. Look, this was a reasonably high percentage event, and Europe should have been prepared some kind of response for over a year. However, European leadership seemed to have willfully stuck their heads in the sand and been living in hopes and dreams that Trump would be what he was not. I'm not going to go into much detail except to say that I have been trying to warn people about this for well over a year. Instead of going through that, this week I took two earlier Substack pieces out of paywall for anyone to read. So, in the description, I will leave the link to this article, and you can see his previous articles. One about this same issue. One is 1 year old, from the February 5th of last year, 2024, and then the next one, what Europe can do in a worst case scenario. It was 2 months ago, more than 2 months ago. It was published on December 5th, 2024. In the end, we are where we are. Europe has done almost no preparation for what should have been a foreseeable event. It is an extraordinary indictment of European leadership. What I will do in this update is run through the three main actors in their policy changes this week: USA, Ukraine, and Europe. I won't discuss the war on the battlefield at all. The front line has witnessed only the smallest of changes anyway. So this is weekly newsletter. He is publishing this. Mr. O'Brien is publishing it every Sunday, and this one is not behind the paywall, because his other articles that he is publishing during the week are normally, you have to become a subscriber, paid subscriber in the Substack to have access to them. But the articles he is publishing on Sundays, where they record what happened during the week, they are free of charge. They are not behind the paywall. Okay. Trump moves towards Putin. What Trump did this week was end of the charade that he was a supporter of Ukraine, and came out openly to say that he was at best a mediator between Ukraine and Russia. However, I would say really that he admitted he was moving to being a supporter of making sure Putin gets a very good deal out of the war. Trump revealed the truth of where he stood openly to the press in the White House 3 days ago. He spoke of a very positive and long call he had with Putin that morning, and made it clear that he was quite close to the Russian dictator. Here is the clip of him discussing the call. By the way, my understanding is that this call was only the latest of a number of calls between them. Trump and Putin have been aligning for a while, either in direct chat or through intermediaries. They only release the info now as they are getting ready to act. So actually, this call changed little. It just revealed where things stood, because they were aligning for some time already. The Trump call was then followed by the one of the most deliberately offensive trips of a US delegations over to Europe. The first to speak was Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who was in Brussels for a NATO summit. Hegseth made the mistake of speaking the Trump policy exactly. He later had to backtrack a little, but what he said first was the exact policy. Hegseth said that Ukraine would have to give up territory, Ukraine would not be allowed into NATO, and that US forces would not be a part of any security guarantee for Ukraine. Moreover, he was clear that any European force sent to Ukraine as a part of any peace deal would not be covered by NATO Article 5, which calls for mutual defense. So this is the link then in the article for Hegseth press conference. In other words, it was practically the worst possible deal for Ukraine and best for Putin. Russia keeps what it has conquered. Ukraine gets no meaningful security guarantees, and the US begins to disassociate from Europe. By the way, Hegseth then doubled down on the US drawing down its forces from Europe. There was talk about redeployment to China, but that is mostly hot air, as Trump actually wants to work with China and President Xi. However, this excuse provides a convenient justification. Basically, Trump wants out of Europe. He just wants to get out of the most helpful way for Russia. Hegseth's open admitting of Trump policy was then followed by the Vice President J.D. Vance visit, which made it clear that not only the Trump administration moving away from its European allies, but actually that the administration would be delighted if more pro-Putin politicians took power in Europe. In a speech that could have been written word for word in the Kremlin, Vance blasted democratic Europe and threw out all the alt-right dog whistles. You can watch the whole speech here. Vance's argument that the openly pro-Putin Călin Georgescu should be president of Romania was more sobering for those who actually believe in freedom. Georgescu is basically a Romanian Orban and would be a catastrophic leader for Ukraine. The US is now actively arguing for the election of candidates who wish to sell out the Ukrainian people. Vance then made his intention clearer by reaching out and meeting the pro-Putin AfD party in Germany, who are in the midst of the tight election campaign, and there is every indication that the AfD will come in second. So after Hegseth outlined the worst possible deal for Ukraine, Vance basically called for all of Europe to come under Putin's influence. At this point, all pretense was gone. Even the ostensibly pro-Ukrainian Keith Kellogg gave a speech that was particularly ominous coming from him. Using some language that seemed anti-Putin, Kellogg actually was pushing for major Ukrainian concessions. Kellogg once again seemed happy to hand over Ukrainian territory, but even more worriedly, he said that European states, Ukraine's biggest backers, would be excluded from the US-sponsored talks with Russia. He is deliberately isolating Ukraine from its friends, the only purpose of which would be so that the US and Russia could bully Ukraine into taking a bad deal. Kellogg also let slip the profound change in US policy, saying that the US would not run the talks as a backer of Ukraine, but as a mediator between Russia and Ukraine. So the US has just abandoned a democratic state to start pushing it to make major concessions to a dictatorship. And there was more. You could say that the last few days were really a series of the Trump administration making concession after concession to Putin, asking nothing in return and isolating Ukraine and Europe more and more. Trump, for instance, on February 13 called for Putin to be readmitted into the G7, almost as a little gift for the Russian dictator. There was certainly no quid pro quo mentioned for this very important step to rehabilitate Putin's international standing. Well, today there were talks in Saudi Arabia, and there was present two persons were present there. One was, I think his name is Dmitriev, who is shady dealer, who is the guy who is a fixer for Putin. And on the other part, from Trump's side, there was a Witkov, who is a fixer for Trump. So, I mean, in this article, we are speaking about that, I mean, G7, there was certainly no quid pro quo mentioned. We don't know what quid pro quo was mentioned between Dmitriev and Witkov. I mean, what was arranged there? What kind of bribes were arranged personally for Trump? I don't know. We can only, I mean, there is something going on there. There probably some money is changing hands, because I don't know otherwise how we can, I mean, this shift to Putin. Okay, but it's just a speculation. Of course, we don't have any reliable information that it was actually going, that this was what actually was going on. Secretary of State Marco Rubio also had a detailed call with Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov, which seemed very productive for Russia. The US description of the talk was short and blunt. However, the Russians were more revealing, basically saying that the discussion included plans to get rid of some US sanctions on Russia. What were termed, I mean, Russian termed them unilateral barriers on doing business with Russia. Russians were not saying that it was sanctions. They were saying that the United States unilaterally imposed on themselves trade barriers on doing business in Russia, with Russia. Oh, and plans for Trump-Putin in-person meeting were accelerated so that the two friends could get together soon and make sure their ducks are in a row. A Trump team now is preparing to embark to Saudi Arabia to meet with Putin team. Well, actually, this meeting already happened. It was not anything significant, but we don't know what was actually discussed there. I mean, between Witkov and Dmitriev, the banker for Putin. In sum, the week has seen the end of the US as a defender of democracy and supporter of Ukraine. From that point, the big story was how Ukraine and the rest of Europe would react. I will not read further. I will leave the link in the description, so you can read for yourself what was the reaction of Ukraine and what was the reaction of the rest of the Europe. And this is quite insightful article. I recommend this, so you can subscribe to Philip's newsletter on Substack. Thank you for watching. Until next time. Слава Україні!